Hey, everybody, how are you? We are live here. I am Frank McCaffrey. This is the Americans for Limited Government podcast. We are live from the border fence here in Hidalgo, Texas. Please subscribe. I am joined by ALG President Rick Manning, and there is a reason we are on the border today because we're going to talk about the immigration crisis, which has been a top topic for many years now. And Rick, I'm actually staring at a flea market here too. But this is something that's very big here in Texas. There's talk that the border wall will be a deterrent. Will it actually work? I think the evidence would show that it would work. But now the question is the funding. Where does the funding come from?
Well, first of all, it's a matter of priorities, and the president's made funding the border wall a priority. He has a little over I think about $1.6 million or billion dollars regularly authorized for border wall funding. Additionally, he's moving $3.8 billion from military construction part of the budget, defense budget, which is currently at $653 billion. So he's taking 2/3 of 1% of that budget and moving it to border wall funding. And so we're looking at miles of border wall being put up. And the fact is, our immigration, the wave of immigration that we're having the illegal immigration, has been on a steep decline for the past 8 months or so. And it's now, we had last month, under 40,000 people coming across the border illegally, compared to the height of the influx, where it was well over 100,000 people coming in illegally. So a lot of the multifaceted approach this president's taken to border security is working. And the wall building, the wall construction is part of that.
Okay, now just for the record, I'd like to explain what just happened. A border security person actually came up to question me. And I said, we're doing a podcast. He left me alone. I think he recognized me. I spent a few years on TV here, so a lot of people recognize me. He left me alone. But they are very strict, and they saw a guy here with a camera. So they started questioning what was going on, but he left me alone. They are very strict. There is a lot of border patrol down here, but the bottom line is a physical barrier is probably an answer to the immigration crisis. Why do people put fences around their homes? Why do people live in gated communities? They're trying to keep themselves secure. Now, there are ways around the fence. Of course, there's always going to be people who find a way. But the bottom line is the Trump administration do a lot to halt the immigration crisis. And we've seen different policies that have. Do you think something like that, Rick, where someone had to claim asylum in other countries before coming in here?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of reasons why the immigration policy has shown real improvement in terms of the stream of illegal immigrants coming to the country. First and foremost, you have put wall up into places where before it had lesser barriers, replacing stretches of barriers that essentially stopped vehicles but didn't stop people from coming across at those particular choke points, and putting people into forcing them into gates, forcing them into choke points rather than being able to walk across unimpeded. Now there's a lot of border, and in Texas alone, there's over 1,200 square miles of border with Mexico, and a lot of it has natural barriers, the Rio Grande River and other things like that. But the reality is, the barriers, Border Patrol tells us the barriers do work when they're put in the right place and are used the right way. So, and that's why the Border Patrol has been asking for the walls. But certainly, combining that with basically partnering with Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador to try to stop the stream of illegal immigrants from those Latin American countries, Central American countries, and working with that. People don't get a free pass into Mexico, and are required under the law, if they end up in Mexico, that's where they have to seek asylum from Mexico rather than from the United States, because they have reached a country where that fits the definition for asylum. So it provides a human rights alternative. It's actually follows the law, follows international law, and so people who truly are fleeing countries for reasons of needing political asylum have the capacity to go to Mexico and get political asylum from the Mexican government, which is different.
Okay.
So that also helps solve it.
Okay, Rick, I wanted to also explain what else is going on here. We've had a huge gust of wind and it actually knocked my tripod over, and it's been kind of a distraction for me. But you can probably see behind me, I'll put it here, we have a flea market here now. I've never actually confirmed this, but I've heard that a lot of the migrants cross over the border and go hang out in this flea market. And then over here, you might be able to see a building, a white building over top of that fence. That's Reynosa, Mexico. That's actually a pretty dangerous place. You can see the fence. It's really just kind of like parts. There's a high wall, and then the rest is just chain link fence around here. Of course, the border wall would improve what the actual fence is in this area, and of course that would really serve as a major deterrent for people crossing the border. Now, one of the things the Democrats have argued here for some time is that new technology, the new tech software out there could help somehow stop people from migrating into this country. Now, there's a lot of holes in that. You know, they say there's a lot of holes in the wall. Well, there's a lot of holes in the idea that new technology would work. Is that correct?
Well, new technology is important. I think flying drones over the border and see, being able to see people who are coming across and transporting stuff. I think electronic surveillance makes sense in terms of technology. But let's be clear. All the technology in the world, if somebody's just walking across the border, it doesn't stop them. It doesn't stop them in any way, shape, or form. And if you have masses of people coming across the border Border Patrol under the law has a responsibility to provide those people with assistance while their legal claims get worked out. And that's when you get into the problem of not enough beds to meet people's needs. That was a problem, when we had literally 3 times, 4 times as many people come across the border as we do now. So it creates a real challenge. The electronic surveillance stuff is good. It's really good when it comes to looking at cargo that's coming in over our checkpoints that is oftentimes hidden within the truck structures and the like. So it works there, but it's not the end all be all. I mean, people are not wearing little electronic collars that when they go through the electronic fence, they get a buzz and told to go back. So this isn't like an electronic fence for a dog. It's you need a physical barrier to make it so people who are coming across the border casually, not people who are cartel members who are determined to get across the border and dig tunnels and the like, but people are just coming across the border for economic migration. Their laws, those people are deterred by a wall. And the more they believe there's a wall, and the more they believe they're going to be turned back or not going to make it into the United States, the less likely they are to leave their homes in the first place.
Yes. Now, again, I'm going to have this flea market now as my background, so you get a taste of what it's like here in this part of Texas. One of the things I noticed that there was also, I would describe it as a very Christian element to this immigration crisis during my years of covering it, meaning, I would be there spending time with all these migrants in the respite centers and in the bus stations, and I'd be trying to talk to them, and you'd see single mothers there with a developmentally disabled child. Or you'd see people who, had really been persecuted for many years, and their kids were kidnapped or had been executed by gang members. And you get to that point where you say, well, it's our job to protect these other human beings. That became a huge question. Like, do we do something to protect these people in need? And it became a debate among many people here. The conclusion I drew is that, yes, God wants us to protect these people. Christ wants us to protect these people, but as we can. if so many people are coming over, how are we possibly going to be protecting all of them? So, I guess the question is, as Christians, do we save people in need if we can't handle it?
Well, I think that, it really is a dilemma, and it's a good one. The challenge, of course, is our social service systems are such that you're getting an equivalent of $30,000 to $35,000 of assistance a year, simply once you get on those systems. We have Democratic candidates who are ensuring that if we have nationalized health care, that it will be that illegal aliens, people who've not followed the rules to get here, are going to be made eligible for that. So at some point, the challenge becomes, what kind of helps can you provide? And for me, the answer is, I give to missions in Honduras that are aimed at trying to create work environments in Honduras where people are able to make a living, create clean water in Honduras so people can, or water filters that allow them to have clean water so they're not besotted with diseases. And so it's a standard of living question. Which as somebody of faith, I believe we should deal with, but it's our job as individuals to deal with. Our government has a responsibility to follow the law. The laws are passed, and the laws need to be followed. That's the government's responsibility. It is our responsibility as individuals to try to help those who need the help and do so in a meaningful way. Now, there's absolutely no excuse, when people came across the border, the Democrats chose to deny funding for bed space for the numbers of people who are coming across the border 6 months, 9 months ago. And they deliberately did so because they wanted people to be living in desperate situations for political purposes.
Yeah.
President Trump proposed $4 billion in funding for bed space on the border, and the Democrats said no. They closed the government down over it, if you remember. And so, so I really don't put much credence when the Democrats try to play the game of, oh, well, we want to be compassionate, when in fact, they've been using these poor people who've come across our border as nothing more than political football, and when in fact you could invest real resources to try to make their lives better. And oh, by the way, all those Democrats, write a check out of your own pocket as opposed to trying to compel everybody else to write checks out of theirs.
Yeah, it has been used as part of the Democratic propaganda machine. We the pictures of the separated families and the people in aluminum foil that we saw. I'm sure you remember this. This happened right here in McAllen, Texas, or the next city over in McAllen, Texas. Melania Trump came to visit a few years ago, and she was wearing a jacket that said, "I don't really care, do you?" which was a fashion statement, but they tried to make it out like she was doing that as a statement against immigration. You're right. There are poor people. There are lives at stake here. There are good, decent Christian people who are trying to find a better life. They heard about the shining city on the hill called the United States of America. They're trying to make a better life for themselves. We need to find a solution rather than politicize it and turn it into some kind of propaganda war.
The fact is that those in our country, many of the ones who are pushing this, have pushing illegal immigration. They have two basic reasons for doing it. Number one, they want votes for the future. And so they look at it, and that's what Democrats want. They want votes. And the more people who are dependent upon the government, the more people are going to vote for big government and for more for themselves. It's a basic rule. So the Democrats want votes. And then the business people, a lot of the big business people, what they want is cheap labor. And so they want to bring people across the border to be able to effectively drive down the cost of labor
Yeah.
And they always say things like, well, they take jobs that Americans won't. What they don't say is they take jobs that Americans won't do for the price they're willing to pay. And
Yeah.
so so they want cheap labor, which depresses our labor markets. And the wage increases that we've seen over the past 3 years have been primarily in the bottom 20%. That's because there's more competition for people in the bottom 20% of the workforce. Well, that's good. That means they're making more. There's more money being made by people who previously were being left behind. Illegal immigration is a direct attack on that, and as a result, and promotes cheap labor and floods marketplaces, and so it has a negative impact on that bottom 20%, which once again, ironically, votes for the very Democrats, primarily votes for the Democrats, who in fact are embracing policies that keep people in that bottom 20%. So it's a difficult challenge. Every single person who comes across the border, whether they're an MS-13 member or a sweet child who's 9 years old and was sent north by their parents, every single one of those people need to be treated as humans. Every single one of those people need to be if they have a case in terms of why they should be allowed to come across the border and allowed to stay here, then our laws don't need to be followed. But our laws also need to be followed in terms of people who come here strictly for economic migration. We allow 1.1 million people to come to the border, to come across our borders legally, to emigrate to the United States legally. 1.1 million. And so for people who don't follow that system, who cut in line, they do harm to the people who come here legally, and that becomes it's really a conundrum. Are we going to control our borders or not? If we don't choose to control our borders, we're not a country. That's just a simple fact, and our laws need to be enforced. If the Democrats want to change the law, they should change the law.
Now, you mentioned that there was more competition at the bottom percentages of the salary scale there. Down here you have a lot of citrus. The citrus industry is very big, and I noticed that the citrus the people who worked out on the citrus fields were actually doing fairly well for themselves. Just in the time I've been down here, just over the last 2 or 3 years, I noticed an improvement there. Many years ago, the citrus workers here, probably about 10 years ago, the citrus workers here were considered to be basically modern wage slaves. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible situation down here, but that has improved dramatically, and the citrus industry has been doing pretty good down here. So yes, we have seen an improvement with the people who work in those fields, and of course, that helps out the people at the top, the people who run these citrus groves. They do pretty well for themselves too. So yeah, that actually has helped the economy in many ways. You are correct. I've seen it many times. It's very windy out here.
Now, why don't we do this, Frank? It is really windy, and the stream is struggling because of that. So why don't we just remind people that we are to click the subscribe button so you can be notified when these podcasts are going to occur and these live streams. And let's just Frank, we appreciate you heading down to the border and giving us a unique perspective on what it looks like down there and what some of the challenges are. And we will be signing off. This is Rick Manning for Americans for Limited Government and Frank McCaffrey live from the border.
Adios.